هو أحد العلماء المرموقين اليوم. التقيته في دافوس، جيفري ويست صاحب نظرية علم المدن، وسألته أولا عن المخاطر التي يتسبب بها نزوح 1.5 مليون إنسان كل أسبوع نحو المدن.
Well, I would say that, all of the problems that we feel across the complete spectrum, no matter where we are on the globe, whether it's to do with things like global warming and the environment, whether it's to do with energy and resources, or financial markets and risk, or social unrest, and keeping the social fabric together, all of these are generated within cities and by urbanization, and they're exacerbated by the fact that we're doing it at this rate that you just mentioned, 1.5 million people a week, which is extraordinary. I mean, that's the equivalent to a New York metropolitan area, not just New York, but the whole metropolitan area every 2 months. And we're going to be doing that inextricably into the future, to the mid-century anyway. And this is an enormous challenge.
And you argue, Professor, that it will not be effective to tackle each of these problems on its own. Why is that?
Yes. So, yes, exactly. This, and the way we at the moment think of these problems, we tend to think of these problems in a kind of stovepipe way. Each one, as you say, we treat as an individual problem, the social problems or the economic problems or the environmental problems and so forth, or health problems. And what we don't recognize is they're all integrated, intertwined, coupled systems, and each one inextricably affects the other. And the reason for this is that if you dig underneath, ask where do they all come from? Well, where do they come from? They come from the interaction between human beings. It's us. Whether it's like this, you and me talking, or it's a collective like this situation we're here at Davos, a collective, but it's all interaction between human beings, and we are multifaceted, and our multifaceted nature produces all of these problems, which necessarily are therefore connected because they go back to individual human beings. So it's critical to recognize that the role of social networks, the fact that we talk to one another, interact with one another, and also, very importantly, that we cluster. We have families, we have jobs together, and so on, this kind of clustering. All of these are kind of universal qualities that bring all of these problems together, and that's their origin.
You have gone as far as saying that there is a science
Yes.
of cities.
Yes.
Yet when we look at cities,
Yes.
they seem very different and distinct. How is that?
Yes, so this is a fascinating question. I mean, so let me just back off for 1 second. Since we have these extraordinary problems and they're generated in cities, and yet the solution comes from cities because cities attract the smart people, it creates wealth, it creates ideas. We need to develop a science of cities, meaning can we develop something that's quantitative and predictive? And as such, the question is, can we really understand what this dynamic is? And a science of cities is, as you imply, means that there's some commonality across cities, and yet they look completely different. They have different cultures, different geographies, different histories. Yet, the thing that's extraordinary is that when you look at the data and you ask questions about simple questions like what's the length of all the roads in the city? Or, what are the wages as you change the size of the city? All of these things, it turns out, have systematic behaviors in a predictive way for the average of a city, not necessarily for the individual of city. But to put it in simple terms, if you take, say, the United States, and you ask me about a city of a given size, you tell me the size of the city in terms of its population, I can tell you, in principle, how many police it would have, roughly, how many AIDS cases, how many patents it produces, what's the length of the roads, etc.
This has been tested.
This has been tested, this has been tested, this is the data, and you can make this prediction at the kind of the 85% level. And it is that other 15%, which is the individuality of the city, which differentiates New York from Chicago, from Los Angeles, and so forth.
Based on this understanding, Professor, how can a meeting like this meeting, a gathering like this gathering, push policymakers to understand that it is time to act collectively and address the global problems together?
Yes, this is a very challenging question, and it's a question that frustrates me because, for example, at this meeting, which brings together an extraordinary and eclectic and broad group of people, dealing with all of these questions that we've just talked about, but they're dealt with in a stovepipe way. They are dealt with in the traditional way, and not only are they dealt with in a traditional stovepipe way, but almost no science comes into the discussion. It's all politics and some economics and so forth, and a lot of it is anecdotal, and it's not based on data and facts and conceptual thinking, creating a conceptual testable framework to talk about these. So I feel very strongly that we need to integrate some of that scientific thinking with exactly this kind of forum that is brought together, but do it in a much more integrated way, in a holistic way that brings these questions onto the table together.